only see maximum 9 people on the screen, but other people will be there in the background. Okay, 1 more minute and we will open the session. People are still trying to find their way into the room. Okay, I think we'll get started and people will join as they join. This is the spirit of this kind of conference. People come in one room, they go into another room as if they're at a real conference. So I hope we'll see more people joining. There are more people, you just don't see everyone. Hi, Anat. Hi. Nice to see you. So welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to this session with Dr. Noga Kוכבי called Ct'im, or Making Time. Making time for study. Well, I'm sure Noga will explain what the meaning of the session is. And welcome everybody to the Global School Twinning Conference. This session is in English, but I'm sure all the Israelis will be able to follow it as well. Before I introduce Noga, I just wanted to tell everybody, if you're not familiar with Hopin, if you don't see yourself on the screen, don't worry, we know you're here with us. Only a certain amount of people can be seen on the screen, like a maximum of 8 or 9 people. So if you don't see yourself, you just sit back and relax and enjoy the session. That's how Hopin works. So welcome to Dr. Kוכבי. Dr. Kוכבי is the head of Jewish Peoplehood Framework at the Israeli Ministry of Education. She's also a lecturer at Haifa University, and she'll be speaking for the next half an hour. What I'd like everybody to do as we're starting, on the right hand of the screen, the right side of the screen is chat. We would like people to write in the chat your name and where you're from, or what organization or school you work for. That way Noga can have an idea who is here in this session. So go ahead and write on the chat your name and where you're from. And thank you for that. And if you have any questions for Noga during the session, the way to raise your voice in this session is to write in the chat. So please feel free, if you have a question, you can write it in the chat. If you write it in Hebrew, that's okay. Noga understands Hebrew and she will translate it. Okay, so go ahead during the presentation. We will, at the end, most likely get to your questions, okay? So thank you, everybody. And we'll get started. Noga, just when you're ready for me to show your presentation, just tell me.
I'm ready. Okay? So I'd like to, if you please can help me with the presentation, Brenda. I'll wait until you. Let's wait until Brenda shares the presentation. I recommend, until it is all set, I recommend you prepare something to scribble on. A simple piece of paper and a pencil will do the work.
Can you see it, everybody?
Yes. Yes.
Can you see? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
So are we all set? Good. Shalom. Good to be here. My name is Noga Kוכבי, and I'm a Jewish Peoplehood nationwide instructor in the Israeli Ministry of Education. Thank you for joining this session. Hopefully, you will leave it with at least one new question. The first thing, if you can just, Brenda, move to slide 2, please. Slide 2. The first thing I'd like you to write down is, I'll dictate. Don't worry, I'm not going to dictate more than one sentence. Jewish literacy is a key condition to Jewish peoplehood. I'll repeat. Jewish literacy is a key condition to Jewish peoplehood. I'm not saying it is the only condition, just that it is a key condition to long-lasting Jewish peoplehood. If you're not comfortable with this statement, there's nothing wrong with you. It just proves that you belong to the Jewish people, the most argumentative people on earth. Furthermore, it is precisely how Jews study. We argue, we practice shaklavetaria, a method of give and take. We negotiate with ideas, opinions, and texts. This statement is leading us to the title of our meeting, of our session, Make Time for Jewish Learning, or better in Hebrew, Likboa Itim. The reciprocal influence between Israel and world Jewry and their common ground, stormy as it may be, create a unique body. In order to comprehend how it works, one should not grant a leading status to universal research methods. Judaism is so unique that it requires its own set of tools. Judaism is staggeringly tested in Zionist sovereignty and in cross-continental Jewish peoplehood. The struggle for Israel's security and its social resilience, as well as the wrestling on its moral character, influenced both Israelis and world Jewry. At the same time, diaspora dynamics have impact on the people living in Israel, היושבים בציון. A good way to get the best out of this reality is to schedule limud Yehudi, Jewish learning. Therefore, our Make Time session is an invitation to discuss this idea via Jewish learning from Klal Israel perspective. A Hebrew expression I chose to use here is Tse Ulmad, meaning go out and learn. This good advice we inherited from our wise ancestors, Chazal, Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, implies that scholarly and morally you can grow only if you open the door to new interactions. Please, let's go to slide 3, Brenda. Yes. Almost 3 decades ago, during of my visits in American Jewish day schools, I sat down for a cup of coffee with a Jewish teacher. Noga, he wanted to know, do you have any affiliation? I was stunned, as he just asked me about my electoral preference. I wondered. I do not wish to discuss my political views, was my answer. Who is talking about politics, said More Joel. I'm talking about your Jewish affiliation. Are you Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist? Ladies and gentlemen, for me, it was almost an identity crisis. You see, until that moment, I did not know I was expected to add a hyphen and an adjective to my Jewishness. Anyways, that simple cup of coffee talk encouraged me to learn as much as possible about how American Judaism evolved, how it has influenced the Jewish world, and how it's important and what is its importance to my life as an Israeli educator. On the right side of the slide, or maybe it's your left, there is the second story. The hero of my second story was a newcomer, Ola Chadasha. She was a teacher under my supervision, and in one of the new teachers' meetings, I asked her, just like the others, if she wanted to share a childhood memory of a Jewish song. I don't remember any Jewish song from my childhood, she replied. Our home was extremely secular and so far from Judaism and Hebrew text. Oh, come on, you must have heard something, I insisted. If not from your parents, perhaps from your grandparents. Her eyes, maybe we should mute all, Brenda, if it's possible. Her eyes lit and she said, I don't know if it's Jewish, but my grandmother used to sing something in Ladino. And she started, Los bilbilicos cantan, suspiran del amor. Sounds familiar? She sang Los Bilbilicos, and what did I hear? צור משלו אכלנו, ברך ואמוני. The Shabbat piyut, the Shabbat song. To make a long story short, that teacher, who had very little knowledge about Jewish texts then, is now teaching Judaic studies. And I decided to incorporate items of Ladino culture in the syllabus, in the Israeli syllabus. These two very simple stories exemplify the idea of Tse ulmad. Get out of yourself in order to learn. Let's move to slide 4. Following personal experiences like those I've just shared with you, professional discussions and disputes, there were arguments with educators in Israel and in the diaspora, following dozens of meetings with educators in New York, San Francisco, Istanbul, and many more. There was at least one thing we Jewish educators agreed upon. Jewish literacy is a gateway to Jewish peoplehood. And on this assumption, we built the Jewish peoplehood curriculum in the Ministry of Education, in the Israeli Ministry of Education. This assumption led to several questions, obviously. So we'll go, before we move to the next slide, I'd like you to see here, what you see here are icons of our designated space in the site Tarbut Yehudit Israelit, Israeli Jewish culture. It's a subject in Israeli schools. It's a discipline. And in a designated area, there are icons of the Facebook group, the Room of Jewish Peoplehood, mainly for educators, but not only. There are 26 learning units. You see in the middle, Yechidot Limud in Hebrew. Each learning unit covers at least 4 or 5 lessons, so you do the math. And the Sifriya, the library, is very, very rich, full of videos and supporting materials and projects. And you should enter and see for yourself. So we'll move on. We can now move to the next slide. Following personal experiences like those I've just mentioned, led us, as I said, to several questions that you see, you can see now. Some of the questions I omitted because we don't have that much time to discuss, but I think the most important are here. Please take a minute or so to contemplate and write your thoughts. I will wait, 20 seconds. What is Jewish peoplehood to you? What are the components of Jewish literacy? How should we approach it? Okay. I'll give you the answer, our answers. Not necessarily your answers, but I'll share with you what we came up with. So Brenda, you can move on to slide 6. We are ready for slide 6. Let's start with the first question. Oh, what happened to the question mark? Hebrew style. Let's start with the first question. What is Jewish peoplehood? This question has numerous answers, obviously. In our focus groups, we dealt with at least 14 to 15 possibilities, but there are more. Eventually, we phrased it this way. Jewish peoplehood is a reality based on interactions and opportunities in the Jewish world. I repeat. Jewish peoplehood is a reality based on interactions and opportunities in the Jewish world. This is our definition. This is the formal definition in the Israeli Ministry of Education. If you have something to say about it, we'll have the time to talk about it later. We'll move on to slide 7. The second question, what are the components of Jewish literacy, could also be answered in different ways that were condensed to several categories, okay? We had to somehow group them. The first category was spiritual assets and cultural treasures. The second category, Jewish history and Jewish memory. It's not the same. The Hebrew calendar, and the fourth category, the Hebrew language. And if you wonder where is Eretz Israel, it's in all of them. Spiritual assets and cultural treasures come from both the diaspora and Eretz Israel. Jewish history, of course, and memories. The Hebrew calendar is based on the seasons of Eretz Israel, and the Hebrew language is mostly spoken here in Israel. We'll move on to slide 8. Surprisingly enough, the third question, how should we approach pedagogy of Jewish peoplehood, also revealed, surprise, surprise, different possibilities. We found out that they could be categorized to two main attitudes. The progressive Jewish American attitude and the traditional Klal Israel attitude. Okay? One is progressive and American, and it was curved. I wouldn't say that it started in the 40s in the previous century, but it became more famous then, and it is identified with Mordechai Kaplan, whom I will mention later also. And the other attitude, the Klal Israel, which is based on the paradigms of one-center, conservatism, and tradition. What are the paradigms of Jewish American attitude? Universalism, Jewish renewal as a movement, yes? The movement of Jewish renewal and activism. The thing is that neither of them, of these two, the American and the American peoplehood and the traditional Klal Israel, neither of them apply to all Jewish strata. We needed an inclusive attitude that can meet all Jews. An attitude that designs a space which is large enough for everybody, but still has limits. So we came up with the settling attitude, which recommends observing the Jewish reality through three windows. Am ve'olam, am ve'artzo, am ve'am tachto. I will translate. The people of Israel, Am Israel, the Jewish people and the world, the Jewish peoplehood and its homeland, the Jewish people and its spiritual cultural assets. In Hebrew, it sounds better, Am ve'am tachto. Am tachat is like a big bag that you carry on your back, so you can pass it from generation to generation. I really don't, I prefer it over the Jewish bookcase, which is heavy, and it's very difficult. It's hard to move it. And you cannot carry it from country to country, or you got the idea. We're going now to slide 9. So we can elaborate a little bit. Am Israel and the world, the Jewish people and the world. What does it mean? Jews are scattered all over the globe. This challenging reality leads to cultural richness and almost endless opportunities. So it's not a bad thing. The Jewish peoplehood and its homeland. Israel is home to every Jew in the world, or at least a point of reference. By saying that, I refer to all Jews, including those who criticize Israel, who criticize the policy of Israeli government and say whatever they think, which is wonderful, as long as you're not indifferent, as long as you care. And the third window we are looking through is the Jewish peoplehood and its spiritual and cultural assets. Well, our spiritual assets and cultural treasures are transmitted, as I said before, from generation to generation. We'll go now to slide 10. Okay, can you guess what this is? It's a structure, the main structure of a learning unit. Well, you probably wonder how this peoplehood pedagogical theory manifests itself in actual learning units. Well, inspired by the structure of Daf Gemara from the Talmud, there is a Jewish text in the center of each learning unit, surrounded by didactic satellites. What kind of satellites? A teacher guide, key concepts, interactive assignments for the students, interactive games, songs, videos, and more. All learning units show collaboration of Israeli and non-Israeli educators, associates in North America and South America, peers in Moscow, Istanbul, Berlin, Johannesburg, and even in Tehran, in Iran. They all participated in this Israeli peoplehood operation that became not only Israeli, but it was created in Israel. While we were making time for Jewish learning, כאשר קבענו עתים, a fascinating pedagogical transcontinental Jewish network was born. You see, when we took the time to learn together and from each other, we became more Jewishly literate and at the same time worked hand in hand on joint projects. In other words, we proved that Jewish literacy is a key condition to Jewish peoplehood. Before we turn to your questions, I'll read something from the Mishnah, which I find very relevant. He who learns in order to practice, it is granted to him to learn and to teach and to practice. Thank you. Okay, please leave the presentation in front of us, because if we have time after, or you can bring it back later, Brenda. If we have time after the questions, we can show something else. So let's see. Hi, I'm Mira Davidson from South Florida. Hi, Mira. Boker Atom. It's not a question. I'm from Toma. Nice to meet all of you. Do you see any question, Brenda? Besides, can you see me?
But we can invite people again in this session. If you have a question for Noga, feel free to write it in the chat at the right-hand side of your screen, where it says chat.
If not, it's okay, because I can say something a little provocative, and then probably people will have lots of things to say. So I'll wait. Okay, so bring back the presentation. And please show us, I think it was slide 11 or 12.
Okay, 1 second.
The one, I'll wait. As I said before, let's go to 11 or 12. I'll stop you. I'm not sure whether it's 11 or 12. Let's see. Yeah, the next one, and then we can go back to the dilemmas here. The next one, yes. Okay. Here, yeah, the previous one, yes.
This one?
Here you can see several, thank you, several examples. אני רואה פה, I see a question. חשיבות ידיעת העברית. יעל, hi יעל, I will answer your question after I'll show you something. On this slide, you can see 4 examples of 4 learning units. And I would like to say a few words about the one on the left, up there. איזה מין חג חנוכה זה? What kind of Hanukkah is it? This is the title of the learning unit. And it was written with our friends in New York and in San Francisco. And let me say something about this unit. This unit is about Hanukkah. The topic was chosen by us educators from America and from Israel because there was an issue with Hanukkah. You can guess already. But we wanted to show, as we were advised by our American friends, our American peers, to talk about Hanukkah and to teach about Hanukkah from a progressive American perspective. That refers, the title, what kind of Hanukkah is this, refers to Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan quote about how Hanukkah should be celebrated. It is this quote of him is taken from his monumental book, Judaism as a Civilization. I'm sure all of you at least heard about it. One of the questions we have asked ourselves while we were working on this unit, developing it, was about the values, the ethics, yes, the values that shine from each Jewish text. We looked at Kaplan's advice and noticed that he mainly spoke about the fun and social aspects of Hanukkah. There were presents and social games and visits to friends or to relatives. It was very much like Christmas, though without the Hanukkah bush. The main idea was not there. The main idea of Hanukkah was missing. The victory of Jewish uniqueness, the triumph of the free spirit. Well, perhaps Rebbetzin Kamala Harris, who announced in her latest Hanukkah speech, I don't know if you heard it, that a main value in Hanukkah is Tikkun Olam. Perhaps she also read Kaplan's book and she was misled. Well, back to our teacher's dilemma. What is the dilemma? The teachers asked how the American Hanukkah should be taught in Israel in the most, on the one hand, respectful way, but also in the most authentic way. That was the question, that was the dilemma. And now I'll stop and see your questions. Yael asked earlier, what is the importance of Hebrew for Jewish people? I think it is extremely important, okay? So much is lost in translation. You see, I heard, for instance, I know that Ve'ahavta lereacha kamocha, for example, Ve'ahavta lereacha kamocha is translated in English to, usually, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. This is how they say it in American, in English. But this is not the Jewish way. In Hebrew, it's not neighbor, it's not a neighbor, it's re'ah. Re'ah is not a neighbor. It's like a close friend or the other. But also, if you put put the different dots beneath the resh, it can be also ra, bad. And this is not a coincidence. And in any case, when you say love your neighbor instead of love, or instead of the ahavta lereacha, you miss a lot. And we had a big argument about it when we heard and read the speech of Rabbi Joachim Prinz. I don't know if you know, many of you probably know. He was the last one who gave a speech before the I Have a Dream speech in March to Washington in 1963, before Martin Luther King. His speech was, I shall not be silent. It was based on Isaiah, on Prophet Isaiah. And there he said, among many important things, he said, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, but he said it in the Christian way, in English. He said, love thy neighbor. And we had a big argument whether to do something with this English translation or not. And eventually we decided that the students are too young to understand what we're talking about. But it is important. I think it was a good example for you, Yael, why Hebrew is so important. And there are so many more examples. אמרו לנו פה שהגיע הזמן להתחיל לסכם. Okay? So we have to finish. We have to end our session now, I think, Brenda. We can say our goodbyes now. Yeah,
any final words? Yeah, that was really meratek, Noga. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. If you could share, maybe you want to share a link. Could you share a link in the chat to your presentation? Is that possible?
What kind of link do you want me to share?
Well, maybe we're probably going to get shut out of the session in a second, but if anybody wants, they can write to me. Here, I'll put my email in the chat. If anybody wants a copy of the matseget, of the presentation, you can just send me an email. I've got the copy and I will send it to you. And you can share this with your students. Maybe you want to give your own version of it. So, thank you, Noga.
You're welcome. I wrote in the chat my email address.
Even better, write to Noga if you'd like a copy of her presentation.
I promise to answer questions.
Any questions until you leave this minute? If anyone has a question.
The stage is starting, so you can go.
Yes,
So
any second it should start on. Okay.
Now
So guys,
you're
invited to go back to the stage. You click leave session and click on stage on the left side of the screen. Noga, תודה רבה. ממש מרתק.
תודה רבה, ברנדה, תודה לכולם.
כן.
Okay.